How you doing? As always, it's good to see you back here at channel Team Real New, right? And actually, funny enough, I am filming this a little after 3 a.m. However, that being the case, that doesn't mean that this is 3 a.m. Soliloquies, right? We're doing something a little different here tonight, and before we get into it, I want to explain why. Because I'm all about the why. That's why I can't do math, right? Because they give you the formula, they tell you how, but they don't ever tell you why, and I like to know, so that's what we're going to do. Oh, damn. Gotta get reused to these controls. So anyway, a few days ago, last week, I beat Star Wars Jedi Survivor, right? I know I'm a little late to the party. It came out earlier this year, but when it came out, I didn't have the money to get it, so I had to wait until I did, and I finally played it, and I really enjoyed it. The more important aspect of this story is that the other night, I was talking to some folks online about how I felt about the ending and the story and some of the choices they made, and it led me to think about the state of things on the channel here. So if you know anything about YouTube, you know that quantity is a factor in your channel's success as well as the purported quality of something. On the one level, it makes some sense because quantity is more objective, right? And like, I've been doing this channel for almost 4 years and I only have like 26 videos maybe? You can do the math on that. That's not even one per month, you know, over those 4 years. YouTube is not my job, right? I have a few jobs outside of YouTube. I play music, I transcribe, I teach. So I was trying to think of a way to up the volume of content on this channel without A, putting complete terrible shit on this channel, and B, you know, doing it in a way that made sense for my life, because I simply do not have the time to put out something the caliber of 3 a.m. Soliloquies every week. I just don't. It takes so much time to make those videos. It takes time to edit them, to film them, to get the footage for them, to write the script, to write the music, cut the whole thing together. It's just, you know, I'm doing it all by myself, so it takes a ton of time. So, you know, I thought to myself, well, one of the big reasons I started this channel, if you watch the first episode in the title sequence, I talk about how I have so many thoughts about all the stuff that I consume. And how it's fun as a human to share those thoughts with other people. I mean, that's why anybody posts anything online, right? So I thought that this might be a cool way to do that with you all. Yeah. What am I, stupid? I can figure it out. So the broad format of the show is that I would make these episodes. Oh, that was the guy I was supposed to kill. I didn't even realize. So the idea is that maybe, you know, once a week I would sit down, share my thoughts in front of a camera about something that I had recently consumed, and just kind of share my thoughts on it, right? And, right, to account for people who would maybe not be quite so entertained enough to look at my face, or if you don't want to look at my face, right, I'd have some game queued up, right? Tonight I'm playing Prototype 2 for the first time. I played the first one, really enjoyed it. So, you know, I've got the second one queued up here. And depending on how it goes, this might be something I do a little bit more of. Those of you guys who watch this channel, who are subscribed, what would you want to see? I know some of my subs are my friends, some of my family, my girlfriend. But for those of you all who are strangers, what would you want to see? What would get you to tell your friends to watch this channel? But for now, we're going to focus on simpler topics. Worry not, 3 a.m. is still going to be a thing. I'm still going to reserve that web show for more complex topics, but I'm going to use this one as a simpler alternative. Take a little stress off of me while hopefully still building the channel and giving people something that they want to watch. Because that's what people like, right? Watching some idiot run his mouth, playing video games, people like that. It's very popular nowadays. So, without further ado, I give you Unsolicited Cognitions. Enjoy. Damn, dude, I'm getting drilled, bro. And I'm dead. Oh, right. Right. You can throw shit at a helicopter. You don't have to just drop kick them like I used to do in the first game. So, yeah, this show will be a combination of, like, I don't know, a streaming video and then also just my general thoughts on things. Taking two things that are pretty popular for online content and putting them together. Because when you're an artist, that's what you do. You come up with ways to monetize your free time. That's the grind. That's what you do. Because as an artist, pretty much your only hope is to generate some form of a passive income. I'm exaggerating, but only a little bit. So without any further preamble, let's get into tonight's topic, which is Jedi Survivor. I just gotta grab cars, that's all. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Jedi Survivor, I'm gonna break up the conversation into three broad topics. The gameplay, the story, and then the format of the game, which is kind of how those two things intersect. Spoiler warning, I'm going to be discussing pretty much everything in the game, all the gameplay, all the story beats and everything. So if you don't want to hear any of that, this is your warning to click off and go check out, I don't know, maybe an episode of 3 a.m. Soliloquies. Maybe go check that out. Maybe go watch that. I don't know. So first of all, when you talk about Fallen Order, the number one thing that anybody's going to bring up is Souls, right? That's the comparison that's going to get made. So broadly, like, what is a Souls-like, right? A Souls-like is an action-adventure RPG where you have checkpoints that restore your health but respawn whatever enemies you've beaten. You have some form of progression that can be lost upon death, and if you make it back to the spot where you died, then you can get it back. Outside of that, it's actually a pretty non-restrictive format to make a game, because it's kind of a Souls-like as long as it has those things. Something like Blasphemous does a really nice job of taking that format and putting it into a 2D. Jedi Survivor is a little less ambiguous, because the fact that it's a three-dimensional game means that it can pretty much one-to-one have that aspect to it. And in terms of exploration and world design and certain aspects of the combat, it is very much what you would expect a FromSoft inspired game to be. Although it's worth mentioning that the combat is a lot more similar to Sekiro than it is Dark Souls or even Elden Ring or something like that. It's all about parrying in sequence, right? It's about shuffling your feet and being faster than your enemies a lot of times. And you also do a lot of crowd control. The combat, you really have to multitask in this game. You're concerned about dealing with your melee enemies, you're concerned about using your force powers correctly, you gotta watch out for your force meter, making sure that that's not, depleting too quickly. You're deflecting bullets and lasers and all kinds of things. You're throwing bombs back at guys trying to kill you, picking guys up, throwing them around. The combat is very open-ended, very fun. I will say that the sword play feels a little floaty. It's a lightsaber, right? So it makes sense that it would handle differently from a sword, which if I had to criticize any aspect of the combat, that would be the thing. If you're going to talk about the gameplay, you also definitely have to talk about the stances. In the first game, you've got your single blade, your double blade, and then your dual blade. The dual wield is kind of like the iconic Cal Kestis thing now. That's pretty idiosyncratic. There's not a whole lot of Jedi that we have seen who do that, and it's kind of like the badass thing or whatever. But in this game, we also get introduced to two new stances. The Kylo Ren style handguard, I just called it the Claymore, and then you get the blaster. You get to use actually a gun. And for me, once I got the gun, it was over. I never used the single blade ever again. The gun, you would think would be lame, but it's so good. It's so good that it's almost overpowered. All the toughest challenges in the game, I surmounted them with the gun. It's true what they say, just bring a sword to a gunfight and all that. Aside from the single blade, all the rest of the weapons are useful in their own ways. The dual wield is good for raw aggression. The double-sided, it's great for deflecting. Blaster is great all around, ranged weapon. And then the Claymore is awesome for penetrating enemies who have more defenses. I felt like they did a really nice job of balancing out all the different lightsaber stances, especially once you factor in the powers that you get from leveling them up. So in terms of the structure of the world and everything, it's pretty Souls-like, right? Big winding world, you just explore wherever you want to go, all that good stuff. Even though the Fallen Order games, right, both of them, so the first one too, even though these games are pretty unambiguously Souls-like in nature, I find myself comparing them a lot more often to Metroid Prime. And I say that for two reasons, right? One, just the structure of the map in the world, where it's this full 3D thing, but you've got this map that's presented in such a way. And then also, you have all these areas that you can't access, where you revisit them later with new powers or items, and then you can, right? That's a Metroid thing. And then the other game that it really reminds me of is the Prince of Persia games, specifically the Sands of Time games, just in the way that some of your platforming puzzles unfold. I'll put it this way, I don't play Souls games for like their dynamism. I don't play Souls games because they're particularly dynamic experiences where you're afforded a lot of freedom and control over your character. And Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor, a big focus in those games is these like action platforming puzzles, and I think that's a really cool addition to the Souls-like formula. And especially all that dynamism, it really lends itself to some of the more impressive set-piece battles and moments later on in the game. And lastly, I'll mention the puzzles. I like puzzles in an action-adventure game. I love puzzle games in general. I think it's a nice way to break up the gameplay and make it so that now you're thinking in a different way. Jedi Survivor did not have my favorite puzzles ever in a game of this type. As far as like action-adventure, like RPGs go, a recent one that comes to mind that had great puzzles, Immortals Phoenix Rising actually. Really enjoyed the puzzles in that one. But yeah, that about does it for the gameplay, so let's talk a little bit about the story. Now, because Star Wars started off as a series of essentially epic fantasies that were set in outer space, the story of any given Star Wars media is very, very, very important. And I think most people would agree that the story that we got is one of the stronger Star Wars stories that we've gotten in the new era of things. Dare I say, one of the stronger Star Wars stories we've maybe ever gotten. It's just a really cohesive story. The whole thing about a Star Wars story is that they're usually very simple, and then they take that simplicity and they go a bunch of different directions with it. The means for this game is basically that Cal is this unhinged, like, freedom fighter. He's working more directly with Saw Gerrera's operation now. He is tired, He's a man on the edge. He's been fighting for a long time. He's the galaxy's most wanted at this point. He's been waging a one-man war. He's grown insanely powerful in doing so. But he's also become, just more and more violent and destructive. He's wrestling with the dark side now because he's been going at it for so long. He's trying to fight this machine that he knows he can't beat by himself. So the central theme of this game, the central arc for Cal, is him grappling with the dark side. It's a pretty sensible direction for the story to go. Not just with what Cal's been doing with his life since we've last seen him. Was I not supposed to kill the fucker? I literally blew his ass up. What do you mean mission failure? So the story actually makes a whole lot of sense. Cal being tired of fighting, a big part of the narrative revolves around you trying to find this mystical hidden planet called Tanalorr, which is hidden inside this nebula, and you need special equipment to get there that only Jedi can use. The idea is that you find the way to Tanalorr, and then you can use that planet as a safe house for all your loved ones. Another big thing with this game is that the group from the first game has dissolved. The cause for that mainly was Cal was killing himself for this fight, and his friends were telling him that he needed to stop, and he wouldn't listen. You've seen that kind of thing before. So it was one of those things of like, look, Cal, we're not gonna sit here and watch you destroy yourself. We're not gonna take care of you if you're not gonna take care of you. So they left. Which, that's one of the only two gripes I have with the game story. We'll get to the other gripe later, but one of them is, it felt like it was too easy to get the group back together. There was all this tension and hard feelings and like a lot of betrayal and resentment on Cal's part, and it felt like all of that was too easily resolved to me. We get a little bit of that tension when the party reforms, but not enough. One thing about the Fallen Order games is that they've been really good about picking villains that match the theme of the game. In the first game, the whole idea was that Cal was this scared survivor who had been fighting by himself for so long. He didn't know who to trust. He didn't know what the rest of the galaxy had in store for him. And you go on this whole like crazy adventure, right? And the whole time you've got this former fallen Jedi who's hunting you down. Thematically, she was a really appropriate villain for that game, especially seeing as how she was the former apprentice of your new teacher, Seer, which, when you meet Seer in this game, She is a badass now. She's essentially Space Harriet Tubman. It's very on the nose. She's working with this group called the Hidden Path, who works to shepherd refugees to safety. It being on the nose doesn't mean it's not cool, though, obviously. Oh yeah. Ho 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 yeah. Damn. This is gonna be a good time. This is gonna be a fun one. Damn. This game heats up kind of fast. You already gotta fight the tank? But yeah, Dagon gave in to his fear and his obsession, which that's one of the big things in the prequel movies too, is that one of the reasons Anakin falls is his desire to protect his loved ones eventually turns into an obsession, and then all he does is hurt them, right? Same kind of thing with Dagon. It's that same sort of like arc. It's a pretty beautiful parallel to Cal's thing. Cal is literally driving himself to the brink of the dark side because he's so concerned with protecting the people he loves. So Dagon is a nice parallel to him in that way. Dagon is not the only villain in this game. The other villain is actually a friend of yours. There's a big twist a little ways into the game. He should have said something like, fuck God. Just definitely get that, because it is very easy to die in this game. What happened to just good old-fashioned power fantasy games? They made a game like this in the modern day, it would be the most fun game ever. With modern hardware, are you kidding me? And games like this and Infamous were possible, 12 years ago. Imagine making a game of this type now. Imagine how incredible it would be. So the other primary villain in the game is actually a surprise, and you don't find out who it is until a little more than halfway through. One of the new characters in this game is your sort of like war brother-in-arms, Bode Akuna, who's sort of like your Han Solo-esque, rogue character, not a Force user, right? Uses a jetpack, uses a blaster, all that good stuff. He's kind of a mercenary, handsome, charming, devil-may-care, rogue kind of guy. You know the archetype. But the spin that they put on it in this game is that he is actually a double agent the whole time. The whole game, he's actually working as a double agent for the ISB, which Cal basically describes as the Empire's secret police. The backstory to it is that he is a Jedi as well, who survived the Purge. The Inquisitors found him, killed his wife, and because he didn't want to lose his daughter the same way, he cut a deal with them. The implication basically is that Bode is doing all the bad shit he's doing at gunpoint. It's either your daughter gets executed the exact same way your wife did, or you betray your friends the whole time, basically. So it's pretty fucked. Once you get the key that you need to go to Tanalorr, Bode betrays you, steals it, sticks the entire might of the Imperial Army, basically, on the Hidden Path headquarters. I thought the twist was very fun. I didn't see it coming. I thought that it made enough sense once they explained it, because the whole thing about a twist is like, if the twist doesn't make sense, then it's not like a good twist. Putting an unexpected twist in a story doesn't automatically make it good. So anyway, Bode is your major villain for the last little bit of the game, which is pretty fascinating, because to have a twist villain come out of nowhere and kind of be your main bad guy, I thought it was pretty risky. I thought it worked out pretty well. So now comes the only other issue I have with the story. The handling of Bode's daughter, Kata. Kata, this is the most stoic, just stone cold little girl ever in the history of fiction, basically, is the point I'm trying to get across to you. It's very funny because you meet her in the Imperial base where I guess she's been living with her father. She can pretty much tell right away that you're not with the Imperials, with the Empire. Maybe the implication there is that she's kind of Force sensitive, which could explain why she's not distrustful of you. She can sense that your intentions are good, maybe. She also mentions that she detects a shift in her dad after the mom gets killed, so maybe that is what it is, Maybe my whole gripe with Kata is nothing, and it can all just be explained by saying that she's Force sensitive, which would make some sense because her dad is a Jedi. But basically, the whole final act of the game, you're chasing Bode, and he's attacking you and running away, telling you to stay away and everything. And Kata, she doesn't seem very shaken by any of it. There's no screams, there's no tears, and it just strikes me as strange. What little girl is gonna be like, oh my god, Dad, please listen to these strangers. You've been acting so weird since Mom was killed, you know? And you had to cut a deal with the people who killed her. You've been acting so weird. Please listen to these strangers that I've never met. It feels out of place to me in a story that I otherwise felt was actually very coherent. Like, why the fuck would this little girl be so immediately trusting of these strangers? Especially after they kill her dad. They 86 her father, and she watches her dad burn on the pyre, and she doesn't really shed a tear. She shows no signs of sadness. This little girl, maybe she's a killer herself. So anyway, that was the one part of the story that I did not agree with, but everything else I thought was great. I loved watching Cal grapple with the dark side of the Force, which they engage with that being the central theme of the game. They engage with that in some really interesting ways. I mentioned earlier that Cal had become more violent and unhinged. You can, dismember your human opponents in this game, which is pretty gratuitous behavior for a Jedi. You can throw them around, you can kind of choke them, you can stab the shit out of them, you grab them and stab them. And then towards the end of the game, Cal actually comes into possession of some dark side Force powers there. Uses them to basically just wipe out every living thing on the Imperial base at the end of the game, which Bode lured you to get his revenge without getting in trouble himself. So I thought that was kind of a cool story beat that sort of tied everything together. Cal's hatred for Bode, his struggle with the dark side that he's been grappling with the entire game, Bode getting revenge on the people who wronged him. I just thought it was a really nice capstone to a lot of what was going on in the game. You've been wading through the Imperial Army the entire game. Cal wades through, Cal is very strong. Even if you're playing on higher difficulties, he's still gonna feel like a pretty powerful character. Seer, they give a conclusion to her story too. You actually come into control of her for a little bit. After Bode runs off with the key to Tanalorr, he basically sicks the full might of the Imperial Army on you, and you get this pretty awesome chapter of the game, really cool set piece where you're basically fighting and soloing, where Seer solos the full might the full might of the Imperial Army. So this whole thing's going down. Bode's just betrayed you. Cal's dying in the desert. The whole thing's burning. You're blowing up walkers and shit. You're like, how could this possibly get any awesomer? And then, you know who shows up? The big bad of the series, fucking Darth Vader himself, shows up for a rematch against, I suppose, one of the only people to ever, survive a confrontation with him. So he shows up personally to correct that. And you engage this very long, very difficult 3-part fight against Vader, And as difficult as the fight was, and as long as it went on for, and as dramatic as it was, I was like, okay, this has to be the final boss, because what could come after the big bad of the entire franchise? Overall, I thought the story was really good. I really enjoyed seeing Cal grapple with the dark side. I enjoyed seeing Seer get the conclusion to her story that she got. I enjoyed the twist. I enjoyed pretty much everything about the story. The only real gripe I had was with Kata and her behavior surrounding the death of her father. So finally, we're going to talk a little bit about the format of the game, the overall structure. This evil people. What science fiction horror game is complete without an evil doctor? An evil doctor doing creepy experiments on sick kids. So anyhow, the format of the game. Like I mentioned, this game took some kind of interesting risks. The guy who is your main villain, I'm gonna say maybe only about 60-70% of the way through the game, when you kill off the guy who's been the bad guy. And then they throw the twist at you, and then you have to fight Darth fucking Vader. And then after all that, the game still isn't over. So structurally, I thought that it was awesome. I thought that it was a really cool subversion of the format that you would usually expect for a game of this type. You would expect Dagon to be your final boss. He was not at all. neither of the people you would expect to be your final boss actually were. You're thinking, okay, well, if Dagon wasn't the final boss, then Vader will be. It'll bring the whole game full circle. Vader was technically your final boss of the first game, but you couldn't beat him, so now it's coming full circle because you're actually fighting him now. And then Bode will just be a cliffhanger. It'll be kind of like episode 5. There's a big twist, the heroes get routed, and then there's a cliffhanger into the last part of the trilogy. But no, the Bode arc is actually resolved. With a game like Jedi Survivor, like a lot of times these longer modern games, I get kind of annoyed when they just go on and on and on. Because it's like, I have things to do. I have so many games I want to play. I simply don't have the time. But with a game like Jedi Survivor, you're like, oh, fuck yeah, I get to play more of this. The format was cool. The one criticism I have is that Bode was a little anticlimactic. Don't get me wrong, thematically, again, very appropriate fight. Bode is a foil to Cal in just about every way. It's just after fighting a centuries-old one-armed Jedi, right, and the literal big bad of the entire franchise, fighting against Bode as the final boss does feel a little like, you know what I mean? It's one of those things. It's kind of like in Kingdom Hearts 358, you go through this big cinematic fight with Xion, and that kind of feels like the final boss, but then you have to fight Riku as the actual final boss for story purposes. It's like that. It's a thing I notice in a number of games where you have to fight what is basically the final boss, you know, Dagon and Vader, and then you fight the actual final boss that's only the final boss for the purposes of the story, rather than because it makes sense. And if the game is good, you forgive that, and I do forgive that. God damn. Hey, how can we make our villains as unambiguously evil as possible? The one thing that I would have added to this game is just a little bit more biome variety. It's been a little while since I played the first game, so maybe I'm dealing with some memory construction, but it felt like there was more variety in biomes. You know, you go to a volcanic area, which you go to a volcanic area in this game too, but it's pretty small, it's not the focus. You go to an underwater area, Imperial areas, Kashyyyk, so you get this nice forest that contrasts really nice with the barren Dathomirian wasteland, and the Bogano like swamps and misty caves and massive underground areas. It felt like a lot of Jedi Survivor was grassland, craggy area, or Imperial base. And like, there's plenty of like fun nooks and crannies and stuff. Like, don't get me wrong, the areas themselves are beautifully designed. I think I would have liked a little more visual variety. That's really kind of it, honestly. Wonderful game. I probably will do a new game plus of it. I say that every time and then I don't. I have so many games to play. What is this like comedy in the middle of this tense situation? I hope you enjoyed this inaugural episode of Unsolicited Cognitions. If you didn't, I'm sorry. Don't leave a dislike and just don't tune in again. If you did like it, you know, let me know, and I'll see you for the next one. If these go well, what I may start doing is taking suggestions for not just things to watch or play and talk about, but also things to play on here. Really, this channel is going to be what we being me and you all the viewers, make it together. Let me know. And yeah, thanks for tuning in.